Board here that does such great work and helps these developers get their jobs done with little trouble. Guide us on our way home tonight. I ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We have citizens' input on non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for audience members to address the Planning Commission on items not on the agenda. Each person will be given 3 minutes to speak. You are first required to fill out a testimony comment card prior to speaking and hand it into the recording secretary. These forms are available by the sign-in podium. Staff and Planning Commission will make every effort to respond to questions raised during citizens' input before tonight's meeting ends or as quickly as possible. Roger Steinke, excuse me.
You
got to turn
press
it
the
on.
button.
Yeah, there you go.
Good evening. Roger Steinke, 1547 South First Street, Canby, Oregon. First of all, thank you all for serving our community. I just kind of came to give you a report back. Talked to you a couple of weeks ago about the development of my property just north of the Beck's house. Said I should meet with the Stafford Development, so I did go and meet with them. Sir, would you have the picture of the West Side Development with?
I do not tonight.
Okay. I got a couple of pictures from the community, the meeting last Monday night, city council meeting. Could I show these to you? Sure. 4 people you can share. So. So I met with Stafford and reconfirmed that I wasn't selling the property and that I'd like them to remove the pictures of the street going north and south through my house and the street to the west that would access to the Beck property. These are pretty good pictures. They have facilities, water and sewer in it. So when I met with them on the 27th. They met with the city staff on the 1st of March. Levi from Stafford called me after the meeting, shared what I would like, and the reply was that people that he met from the city of Canby were reluctant for what I had asked. So 2 questions I have is that Cheryl and I live in our house, so right about the T is where my house is. To the left, I have 2 20 by 30 outbuildings, one north of the proposed West Street and one south.
Roger's at T by 15th Avenue?
Yes,
Okay.
Can you point that out to?
It's right here.
certainly.
It's the
I
T
just
where
want to make sure I'm
15th and
seeing what, so I understand.
Okay, so right about, oh crap, I'm looking at this place, okay. So right here is where our house is,
Oh,
and then right here I have 2 20, one on each side. Yeah, right, just right here, I have a 20 by 30 outbuilding, a 20, 30 by outbuilding, they're about 60 years old, and then,
can you like just draw a square on the property you're not selling? Oh, that's fine.
okay.
Gotcha.
So like I said, the house is right here, the 2 outbuildings are
Okay.
right here.
So there'll be no access to this cul-de-sac then at all?
Correct.
Okay. Did you guys see this? So the section is, here, I'll just do it on yours. That whole section there's not.
Oh, so your property spans the street that goes vertical?
Well, I don't know if there's a street name for that.
Not yet.
I just call it
Oh, okay.
the north-south
So
street.
you'll span that 15th and the
Yes.
street they got, okay.
So, well, my concern is, if in 10 years, Cheryl and I chose to develop partially our property, or if we sold our house to someone who chose to live in our house, but still wanted to live in the house and develop property, we're tied to that. They would have to tear down the house for infrastructure, is the way I see it on there. Anyway. Second thing is, if we stay for a decade and the Wenrick property, just to the north with the cul-de-sac, they choose to sell or develop, they have no access for development because it's planned to go through our property with all their infrastructure on that. I don't know what would happen if they approached a city and said, can't do anything with that property because all the facilities go through the Steinke property. So I think that's a concern. Which I'd still like to work on, is I was wondering if in the pictures that the city makes, if they could, because I'll come back for an update, is if our property, the 2 acres, could have the lot plans removed, just so when I talk to people about it, it would see my house, the outbuildings on it, without lots on it. I think it makes a little bit clearer picture, because I think with lots on it, it shows intent, and I don't have any intent now on that. So I was wondering if that could possibly be done in a couple of weeks. That way, if I come back to give another update, it'd be a clear picture that everyone could see. Working with Stafford, they've been great. We're trying to make this work out on that. So tomorrow morning, I will call up Stafford, set up a meeting for this week, and try and go over the issues, what the reluctance of the city is with that. And not knowing how this works would be easier if I said I was going to ask to be on the agenda in 2 weeks. And if I chose, if there's no need to speak, then just cancel out on that? Or what would be best for you as a body?
Probably have to.
Yeah, I can
discuss
probably
Brian.
address that. He's broaching a tremendous amount of issues, actually. They're all interrelated. And they'll all come up for review when the proposed Beck subdivision is in front of you after they make application and submit that. And at that time, you'll see what they're currently planning is presenting 2 different options on how to serve the area near his property with street layouts. One would follow the concept plan that would have 2 streets aimed directly at your house. And the other one would have a street that would go around your house out to First Street. That's the last that I heard from them.
So I've seen so there have been many pictures. I've seen a picture with a street access bordering Mr. Wenrick's property and mine. And then, so it would have access to the cul-de-sac in that. But this is also a concern of mine, is the way 15th Street is right now, is if it went through the way the picture is, it would go between the outbuildings, I believe, take out my maple tree, which was fine, trees grow back, but the part going north might be right in my driveway on that. If there's a plan to go past the cul-de-sac and wind its way to 15th Street, that could possibly, that way, remove a couple of buildable lots in the future. Because those would be the two houses to the north of 15th Street that could have an adverse effect on in the future. So I said I'm going to contact, Stafford again this week. We're working on this, and everything like that. But I'm concerned on that.
So to try to answer some of your other questions, the property to the north of you, you were worried about them if they were to come in and annex before you're ready to sell or develop your property. And yeah, that's a little bit of a concern, but they actually have an option of utilizing that road 15th that would go out to Fur and hooking onto it. Or if they don't choose that plan, they could actually take physical access and develop their property directly from First Street as well. That is an option for them.
Yes.
And then the development concept plan for the entire Southwest Canby area was adopted by the council. And so that's why it's somewhat difficult just to change the map at this point. Depending on the nature of how the subdivision is shown by the applicant, it's possible they may have to go back to the council to have them approve a modification of that approved development concept plan. We can approve it, and the Planning Commission can approve that without it, but one of the options with the street going around your house right now actually results in the possibility of a variance application. And that's why we're concerned that maybe it's going to have to go back to the council for them to review that difference.
So one thing that I asked Stafford to take to the city was I just heard that the Wenwick property would have an opportunity to still be developed with access to services off of First Street, because there is sewer and water on it now. Because there is also, the sewer also still runs past our house, down towards the Beck's property. One thing I said that I believe Stafford shared with the city staff was that with having the seats removed from our property, I would like to have access to our property off of 14th. There is sewer, there is water. As an example, 14th Court at the end of the street, there are 10 houses with 2 duplexes on it. I believe they have access off of First Street, Pacific Crest Drive, which is the Hope Village cul-de-sac duplexes. I'm sure that they're also served off of sewer and water off of 14th also. So I do believe that there would be a way to facilitate development of our property in the future with existing services that are on First Street. And there's still time to talk about this. It's been more than 3 minutes. So I just wanted to run this by you, give you time to hear this. And I said if possibly you could have someone draw a picture on the overhead to show our property without the lots on it, just show the house and the 2 outbuildings. I said I just think it's a better picture on that. And so thank you for your time, and I'll maybe see you in a couple of more weeks and let you know how Stafford and I are working out our plans for the property, okay?
Yeah, that's great. Good luck with that.
Okay.
Let us know.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think the time to come back, though, is when we have an application in front of us, correct?
It's really the developer
'Cause
that
we don't
has to
have the
propose
application yet.
something
And-
at this
yeah.
point.
Yeah, I was going to say that would be my encouragement is to continue working with Stafford and working on those issues with them until they have the subdevelopment application. This is just the concept. This isn't necessarily exactly how it's going to go. So just make sure that, you know. You continue working with them.
Okay, so I'm glad I heard the word you say, concept, because Cheryl's and my feeling when we left the meeting the other night, the city council meeting, we felt that it had kind of gone from concept to concrete.
The concept has to be adopted in order to be able to approve the annexation, so they had to adopt the concept.
Right.
But when the subdevelopment application comes forward, it may be different because they can't force you to put a street through your property. So we're not going to nobody's going to take your property unless you decide to sell it.
So the stance staff is taking right now is that even the street layouts can be altered, but they have to demonstrate that all infrastructure is still satisfactory to the Public Works Department, the other service agencies, and that it doesn't result potentially in not meeting other ordinance requirements by the layout. And so that's what I'm a little bit concerned about with one of the alternative layouts I've seen, is that it looks like it results in a variance, doesn't meet our block length standard. And so they're working and trying to decide how to resolve that issue, possibly bringing two different plans to the Planning Commission.
Okay, thanks for your time. As I said, I'll meet with Stafford this week again, and I'll go over that technical building terminology with them, okay? Thank you
And
much.
just to let you know, we don't have any influence to any of those changes. We have to see an application come through in a public hearing, and then that's when it's a time we can actually sit down and talk about that kind of stuff for any changes. So I just don't want you to think that we're going to produce anything for you, because we can't do that.
No, I just wanted to let you know that you guys recommended me to do something, and I did it. Thank you for the advice on that, and just let you know what took place from the meeting, okay?
Great.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Is there any other citizen input? No. Approval of Planning Commission minutes for February 12th, 2018. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion to approve the minutes from February 12th, 2018.
I'll second.
All in favor of approving the minutes for February 12th, 2018, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. New business?
Unless it,
Considering a request for a site and design review and a minor land partition, applicant proposes to partition a lot with an existing home into two parcels and develop the vacant lot with the two apartment buildings with a total of 8 units located at 203 Southwest 3rd Avenue. It's DR 18-01 /MLP 18-01 Tivoli Apartments, Jason Bristol. The matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing, and all interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please fill out the public testimony card and give to the recording secretary. At the appropriate time, when your name is called, please step forward to the microphone, state your name, address, and interest in the matter. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. You may be limited by time for your presentation. Generally, the applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be given 5 minutes each. The opponents will be given 5 minutes each. And those thought to be neutral on the matter will be given 5 minutes each. The applicant will then have a 10-minute rebuttal. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access and to become a part of the record. All written testimony received, both for and against prior to the hearing shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Everyone present is encouraged to testify, even if it is only to concur with previous testimony. At this time, I would like to ask any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest to please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from the hearing of the present matter.
No, sir.
Ex parte contact. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time. Nope. Does any member of the audience have any questions for any commissioner regarding conflict of interest or ex parte contact? The public hearing will be conducted as follows. The staff report, if any, by the hearing body or staff. Open public testimony, applicant not more than 15 minutes, proponents not more than 5 minutes each, opponents not more than 5 minutes each, neutral not more than 5 minutes each, rebuttal by applicant not more than 10 minutes. The public testimony will then be closed, and there will be questions, if any, by the hearing body. There will be a deliberation by the hearing body and no additional testimony unless specifically allowed by the chair. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure outlined for this hearing? Okay, we have the staff report then, Brian?
Sure will. Good evening, Commissioners. This shows the location of the property in the red hatched area. It's 0.74 acres, has frontage on Southwest 3rd Avenue. It's just a short distance here, 350 feet or so from South Ivy Street. The property has a home existing up here at the front of the property, and so the intent is to develop this R2 zoned, here's the zoning, the R2 zoned property with a higher intensity of use by partitioning off the house. Here's a picture of what it's going to look like, but you can see the house, existing house in the front part here that's showing up. And in the back, there's to be 2 buildings, each a fourplex. I think the front building, I don't remember now. The front building has 1-bedroom apartments and the back building is 2 bedrooms, possibly vice versa. I don't remember now. There's the site plan layout. This is actually the preliminary site plan that was showed at our pre-app meeting, but they're very, very similar. This one actually shows some of the issues that came up in review of this particular development proposal. But you can see from this site plan, here is the existing home. And one of the requirements, and they've certainly gotten very, very close, that we'll point out, it was a concern in one of the letters submitted by Jennifer Driscoll, who lives on Southwest 3rd Avenue. behalf of her family. Some really good comments that were in your packet. But in order to provide access back here, they've made an access drive along this side of the property from 3rd Avenue. And in order to satisfy the fire department's requirements for radiuses for getting their large truck to drive back here, they've indicated that right here you have a sidewalk shown. And the radius is shown right along here, that the wheels or the front bumper of the vehicle of a 48-foot fire truck might have to take to get back here. And what that shows is a property boundary proposed here, and you can see that there's driving over a mountable curb across part of this sidewalk and across part of this property in order to get back here and handle this. So there is a condition within the recommendation, condition number 10, that talks about that they'll be required to show all necessary access and utility easements on the subject property when the partition plat is filed of record. More specifically, if we were to identify a little bit clearer, parcel 1, which is this parcel, needs to grant an access easement for this portion of the access road and sidewalk that's intended as a private sidewalk to provide access for these apartments back to 3rd Avenue, the public sidewalk. They need an access easement across their property in order to allow that access that's on parcel 2. Another option would be potentially to draw this property line that's now a rectangle and curve it around the boundary here. If they can do that and still meet their minimum 7,000 square foot lot size, which staff's pretty confident that they can do that, that would be another option that they could take rather than granting the easement across the property. Just put the entire sidewalk and easement on parcel 2 instead of the house property. This site plan kind of shows you that they have a parking lot in this area. They've modified that from the pre-app. There's another site plan in here, but this one's pretty nice. That shows a little bit of a bump out here so these cars can back up here and then head back out. There is additional parking in this area here. And what they have is a total of 13 parking spaces. That's 1 parking space for each bedroom. So you have the four units in the one building, and then you have 8 units or 8 bedrooms in the other. And so there's 12 bedrooms. And then they have 1 visitor parking. And one of those parking spaces is a designated handicapped space. That is the very minimum ordinance requirement. And so they do meet our ordinance. It was indicated in the letter from Jennifer Driscoll that they're concerned about the possibility of a lack of parking. And I had a visit with the applicant because just across the street is the Zoar Lutheran Church parking lot. And they actually, over many years, 30 or 40 years, they've actually allowed some of the commercial businesses along Ivy Street to park in part of their parking lot. So, you know, it's possible they might make an arrangement with this apartment complex if need be to allow some parking in the evenings in their parking lot when it's not being fully utilized. We have some other evidence that in the evenings the parking along 3rd Avenue is pretty darn tight just from the existing residents that live up and down this street. And so if there are visitors, more visitors than we expect, or occupants in these units with more cars than our minimum ordinance requirement, then we always have the fear that they're going to park along the private road and therefore block fire and emergency access. So this is going to have to be signed, no parking, so that doesn't happen. It is private. City doesn't necessarily enforce those standards on private roads. And so that's a common issue that comes up when we're dealing with private roads, but not in an unusual circumstance, especially for an apartment complex. So we just mentioned that issue because it could potentially be a practical issue, but as proposed, it meets our minimum code requirements. There is a trash dumpster located right here. Also, the fire and trash turnaround is basically pulling up in this area, backing up here and going back out forward. So they've taken that into account and have provided for trash service for these apartments, so they don't need to worry about individual cans and taking anything out to the street or anything in that matter. Reviewing the staff report, you'll find that they've gone through our residential multifamily design matrix, where there are some choices for gaining points to help assure a quality development, and staff is satisfied that they've met that point requirement in that matrix. They've met the landscaping requirements for the site. And as I mentioned, the fire and trash access and parking are all taken care of. In the minor partition itself, we do have a standard. This is another concern that was voiced by the Driscolls, is that with this access easement and the sidewalk and the drive going so close to the corner of this existing house, that makes it less desirable than some might think. We do have an ordinance standard that says when you have an existing house that you're trying to work a flag lot, and basically this becomes a kind of flag lot to get back behind it to develop it and keep the house intact, that your access road should be a minimum of 5 feet from the wall of the house. And they do have a dimension on this particular map indicating they're 7 foot from the wall to this property line. It's a little less certain how far it is from the corner of this house right here to the edge of the sidewalk. It actually, the ordinance says from the edge of the wall of the house to the edge of the drive should be at least 5 feet. It does certainly look like it's at least 5 foot to staff, but it's a close distance. So I wanted you to know that it actually meets the code requirement as far as staff could tell. And if need be, we can make sure when the partition plat's done or something that there's some sort of dimensioning or something that guarantees that that 5 foot is being met. This map here is showing some of the existing improvements that are on that property, parcel 1 that has the existing house. There's a network of sidewalks and such. All of those are going to be removed, it would appear, because they're right on the property line or such that's being proposed. Here's a picture of what the elevations on the buildings are going to look like. And staff did recommend approval of this partition and the associated design review for the 2 quadruplexes, I guess, that are proposed as an apartments. And a couple of the unique provisions came from the city engineer with 1 through E listed here. And we have made one change in the recommendation of condition 1E. by removing, I should better look that up here. Removing one word, I think it's the word, where is that? Oh, I think I've already removed that from this particular version. I think it's in your, yeah, so it's been removed from the version that I have on the slide here. That's why it confused me. So on the last sentence of condition E, in your packet, this says, overflow route may be required, and we're removing the word route. That was suggested by the applicant's engineer. He explained how drainage plans and standard terminology works. And in this particular case, route was a little bit too specific to allow them the freedom from the nature of this site and its drainage for him to believe that he's complying with that. And so it leaves the flexibility to take that word out of there. And so we did that. It wasn't harmful, and we checked with our city engineer. He had no problem with doing that. So I just wanted to let you know that, and we made that change already to our findings that are on tonight's agenda as well. So basically, you've got the existing driveways needing to be retrofitted for ADA. There's a requirement for commercial thickness to an apartment complex on that driveway, connection with the public street. That's what number A indicates. They're talking about in C, a relocation of an existing power pole that's going to be needed, and extending the sanitary sewer from a manhole that's on 3rd into the site. And then on condition number 2, we talk about a need, because currently there were not any bicycle spaces indicated on the site plan. There has been some discussion about them hanging from the porches. The applicant will satisfy that requirement and will make that a condition of approval that he does provide those 8 different bike parking spaces in some manner on the site. We actually did a triplex development on Township Road not too long ago. It was started out as 2 triplexes, but it ended up a duplex and a triplex. And they ended up actually putting their bike parking spaces in the garages on those particular units, because they had garages. And we allowed them to do that in that particular case. A little bit unusual, but it wasn't really an apartment complex as such. But we felt that since they had their own individual garages, that was appropriate to handle that in that situation. We indicated a need on condition 3 for an irrigation plan prior to construction of the project. Staff doesn't actually review the irrigation plans, but we have to review that there is absolute certainty that one will be provided. And let's see. Talked about this is that condition 10 that I was talking about. It's kind of worded openly to make sure that parcel 1 provides an access easement for the road and sidewalk across the southwest corner of it, and make sure that that easement gets shown on the partition plat when it's filed of record. So with that, again, we recommended approval of this particular application. Do you have any questions?
I've got a couple questions. So Brian, on the, if you go to, so what we're approving today is they still have to come back and this is more like approving a concept plan, correct?
No, this is The next step after this is for them to file a partition plat, and to do that, they will file a final plat application with us. That partition plat will be filed of record to make the two separate parcels, and then they will be developing their construction plan set, which will be the final layout for the site. It must follow this preliminary site very closely. So you're approving the site. You will not see this again.
So my question, I guess, is around the fire. Are we, because I didn't necessarily see that in your conditions of approval for us to say it's okay for them to, is that normal for us to allow people to drive on the sidewalk to get the fire truck in?
No, that's not normal, but it's a private sidewalk. So we don't necessarily have a problem with it. It's not a public sidewalk. I doubt that we would allow them to do that with a public sidewalk, but it's a private sidewalk. We don't have any particular standards, so to speak, on how we do those. It's, hopefully a fire truck never has to go in there. So it's not practically a problem. So what they have to do, though, is make a mountable type curb to make that easier for them to be able to do that. But it's not going to be a practical problem because there's not going to be fire trucks in here driving on this sidewalk unless one of the units are burning down, and we hope that never happens.
Yeah, I agree, and so, but we are approving a condition that the road is not adequate to the condition of the radius that's needed for fire, is that correct?
That's right. For them to assure, and I'm not 100% sure whether the tires will actually, there's a chance the tires will go up there. When you do these radiuses, you're going from the bumpers of the trucks because they have to sweep around. And so I don't know whether it's just the truck bumper that will be going up over the sidewalk or whether the tires will actually do that. But I think they're concerned that the tires or that the truck might have to go up on them because they mentioned something about mountable curbs.
But the road does not meet the radius, that's one of our conditions, correct?
It meets the fire truck's required turning radius if they can go up onto that one portion of the sidewalk.
Okay,
So
but the
they're
road,
satisfied
but the
with-
road doesn't meet it, right? That's what I'm asking, is the
No,
road?
just the road itself does not.
Okay,
It does encroach upon that sidewalk in that one little area. Not the entire hatched area, but there's a radius line. I don't know
yeah,
if you can
it's
see.
hard to,
It's just this little area right
we've
here.
got that part of the plan that shows the radius of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is what you will face when you're trying to develop an area that's otherwise inaccessible by keeping an existing home.
Sure.
Your alternative is to tear the home down, so you don't have this particular situation.
Any other questions? Okay. Proponent?
Good evening, I'm Pat Sissel with Sissel Engineering, 375 Portland Avenue, Gladstone. Go ahead and introduce Jason as well.
Jason Bristol, 21733 South Highway 99E, Canby.
So I just wanted to begin by discussing the fire truck turning radii. If you look at that plan, there's one turning radius that is 48-foot outside radius and a 28-foot inside. That would be the one farther to the right, you can see it labeled 48-foot fire truck turning radius. That's a minimum. The other one where the radius goes up over the sidewalk, you can see that's got a 35-foot inside radius and a 55-foot outside. That's actually larger than is required. Sure. And the reason for that is when I discussed this project with Todd Gary from the fire department, the discussion was, originally we had drawn it up as a 28 and a 48, and it showed, it encroached over the sidewalk. It wasn't nearly so close to the corner of the house, but he would like to see, 28 and 48 is the minimum. He said if we can get something more than minimum, that, that's an improvement. So we changed the geometry of that corner a little bit, and then we showed really what the maximum was. The maximum was a 35, and because there's no reason why they couldn't roll up all the way onto the back of the sidewalk. If they're going to roll up onto the middle of the sidewalk, they could go all the way back. I did want to note that because this is multifamily, all the units will be fire sprinkled. So the likelihood that they'd need to take a big truck into the site is less because it is fire sprinkled. But it doesn't matter if you fire sprinkler or not, you have to design to the same turning radii. It's always a 48-foot outside radius and a 28-foot inside radius. For your ambulance vehicles, the smaller fire truck, they'll be able to get in there without any problems. But by trying to move it so that the sidewalk is totally outside of the turning radius, it puts that sidewalk virtually up against the wall of the home. And it seemed like, given the likelihood of a fire in this area and the need to get the big truck back there, that it was more of a benefit to move that sidewalk away from the house a little farther. So that's the reason the plan has been drawn up as it is. It is tight. But when you're, as Brian mentioned, when you're trying to save existing homes and get back in to access the back parts of these properties, you do run into tight spaces, and that's where we're at here. The other thing was we needed to provide room for the electrical transformer, and the only spot that Canby Utility really wanted to put it was where we have it shown. As you go through the S-curve, it kind of sits on the bottom of the curve there. It's got an arrow pointed to it that says transformer right there. So we're trying to work around the house, but we're trying to work around the transformer too. And anyway, we believe we came up with a good plan that that saves the home. As far as the parking and the width of the access, as Brian mentioned, it meets code. Would we like to have more? It'd be great to have more, but when you're trying to do these infill projects, sometimes you can only do so much. And as you're going through it and you come up with the plan and you're like, this is a good workable plan. Does it meet minimums? Does it meet the standards? And you go through the code and you say, yes, it does. Well, if it does, then it's, our feeling is it's approvable at that point. Ultimately, you make the final call on that. But usually if you get to that level that you meet the minimums, then it's an approvable project. And that's how we looked at this when we were going through the design. The one other condition I just wanted to mention is Brian touched on that condition of approval 1E, just removing the word route. Usually when you talk about an overflow route, you talk overland flow. And our overflow for this project will be a second dry well. So that was the reason for the removal of that word. This site actually drains, it actually falls from Third toward the back. It's difficult to get an overland flow to go uphill. So that's why we're going with the second dry well. I'm going to touch on utilities just a little bit, and I'll let Jason discuss some of the architectural issues or features. Most of the utilities for this project will be private. The only public utilities are we'll be putting a new 8-inch water line across the street, putting in a new fire hydrant right at the access to the project. So if the fire department ever does come, there's a fire hydrant right there. It'll be private domestic water and fire water that'll go back into the site. We're going to connect to a sanitary sewer manhole right in front of the entranceway, extend a short piece of public sewer to the driveway approach. Everything else will be private, going back into the site, and all the drainage will be private. As Brian mentioned, the sidewalks, the driveway itself will be private. So I'm going to turn it over to Jason now, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have after he's finished.
All right, good evening. I was just going to touch on some of the more like highlights or features of the development that make it a really nice quality development. First, exterior finishes. We're doing beveled siding. We also have the board and bat verticals, which we can see on the plans there. We've got arched roofing, pitch 612 with gables. We had a requirement of 14 trees. We're proposing 38. So we're really going to make it a really great looking green development. 0% of the landscaped area is going to be grass. So it's all shrubs and all trees. Everything will be irrigated. We have over almost 8,000 square feet of open space. We'll have picnic tables. There's going to be an arbor. And there's also garden boxes. So the tenants can actually plant their garden and have flowers or vegetables. The patios and balconies are all at the front of the buildings. So what that'll do is it'll keep the eyes on the access and the common areas. It'll also minimize the impact on the neighboring properties with people sitting or barbecuing and being on top of the neighbors. The units will be ADA adaptable, both downstairs and upstairs, which means that they can be converted into a residential version of ADA compliance. Building A, which is the front building, is 1-bedroom units, 1 bath. They consist of 4 at 733 square feet each. The back building has 2 bedrooms, 2 baths at about 1,058 square feet each. This project sits on about 3/4 of an acre, which is in the city of Canby, and this development maximizes the use of this high-density land. The last thing I wanted to mention was on the patios, we also have a storage unit or closet. And while it's not necessary that the bike parking could go in there, it would fit hanging. So if somebody wanted to lock their bike up for the winter, that's an option. Any questions?
Any questions? No, I don't think so. Well, nobody else is here, so I don't think we need opponents, neutral or rebuttals. So I'd like to close the public testimony. Are there any questions by the hearing body?
I've got some discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
We okay to discuss? Okay. I'm still concerned about the access. I mean, I think you're doing a great job at putting in something that I think is very usable for the city of Canby, but I think it is a little bit tight. My worry is, and if we can go back to that, Brian. My word, and I don't know if this is gonna be fenced here, right? Is it probably gonna be fenced? My worry is, and I don't know if you've been in an emergency type situation. I have. If does have to come in here to help anybody. Every one of these folks are gonna be going right this direction, right? That's the only way out. And if they're tight in here trying to get in here, they're gonna be going right towards the people. So it makes it very difficult for those kind of situations in a medical emergency if there is a fire. It's great that you're putting the fire sprinklers in there, but I think that you're not allowing people to escape and you're creating a congestion point that may pose some issues from an emergency standpoint. I know we don't plan for those kind of things, but those things do happen. So, I mean, did we get input at all from Brian, from the fire department on this?
Yeah, we sure did. I mean, they've accepted this
They have.
access with the accommodations on the radius. That was their issue, is being able to have at least that minimum accessibility for their truck itself.
Is this somebody that's living in this home that doesn't want to move, or you didn't want to develop it fully with apartment type?
It's almost 3,000 square feet, and it's a foster care home.
Okay. It's my discussion.
I kind of was just with you on that.
I have a little bit of discussion as well. My concern is obviously the parking. I know you guys met the minimum code, and there's nothing we can do about that, but I guess my encouragement would be really to kind of take the proactive approach and maybe chat with the church across the street to make sure that there's okay to park there, and if not, again, I don't know that I could suggest this, but I might say, offer to put up some signs for them to say no parking, no apartment parking at the church, because I know that that would be one of those things where it would be very easy for a complex that is overflowed at night to go, the church, there's nobody there. So that's just my concern, is that it's going to create some sort of tension between the complex and the church. So if there's something could be worked out prior to building, I think that would be beneficial, whether it's, providing signs to say no parking or to provide some sort of agreement. And maybe it's a financial agreement, I don't know, but with the church to say, can we use it for overflow? So there does seem to be some extra parking over there at times. So that's, just discussion and suggestion.
Great idea. I didn't mention that I'm going to be keeping this project and managing it, so that's a great idea, and I'll do that. I'll also like to work with them to see if they could help me fill the complex so that it would be convenient for people that want to live right across the street from their church to just walk over. That's ideal for me too. So I'm trying to make this a nice quality development that is easy on me too. So as a landlord, that's, if it's rough on everybody else around me, it's rough on me. So smooth is good. And thanks for that.
I don't think so. Anybody else? No?
That's all I have.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve or not?
Mr. Chair, I would, let me get back to it here so I can get the numbers right. I would make a motion that we approve DR 18-01 / MLP 18-01, the Tivoli Apartments, Jason Bristol, based upon the conditions of approval set forth by staff and the discussions that we've had tonight.
Motion's been approved or seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Final decision then. Site and design review, minor land partition, DR 18-01/MLP 18-01, Tyveli Apartments, Jason Bristol.
I would move that we accept the final decisions for DR 18-01/MLP 18-01 Tivoli Apartments, Jason Bristol.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Final decision is approved. Do we have any items of interest from the planning staff?
No, we noted on the agenda that our next regularly scheduled meeting would be for March 26. Currently, we do not have any applications for that. We continue to work on some code amendments as time allows us to do that. We've been doing that for a year and a half, but it's nowhere near ready to come before you yet. So I'm expecting to cancel the next meeting.
So we'll be notified one way or the other whether
Sure
we have
will.
the next meeting. Any items from the planning commission?
No.
Any motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn this meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.
Okay.